I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
States of America,
to the republic
to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we need to have an approval of tonight's agenda. Has everybody read it?
Yes,
Any corrections or changes or additions?
just the date.
Oh, to the
Date.
agenda, just the date. Okay, we got that. So may I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please?
I move that we approve the agenda for Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021.
May I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Jenna, second by Chris, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Does anybody have a declaration of conflicts of interest?
I'm gonna have to recuse myself from item 8 in the design review, land use public hearings of Minturn North PUD.
Okay, and you won't be voting this evening either. So
No,
that works out.
it
Okay.
works out great.
And then I just wanted to tell, for transparency's sake, I did help Mr. Stone with his website for Helen's House, but I have nothing to do with the Agora itself, just for clarification.
Thank you. Has everybody had time to read the minutes? Has
Yes.
anybody had any corrections or changes? I had a few editing and I gave them to Madison and she's taken care of them. So with that, may we have a motion to approve the minutes of June 9th?
I'll make a motion to go with the minutes of June 9th.
May I have a second?
Second?
Motion by Chris, second by Jenna, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Open to public comments, which are not on tonight's agenda. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak? No, we'll close that. Planning Commission comments. I would just like to mention to all of you here and those parties participating in this evening's meeting by Zoom or by social media, that town hall meetings are now open to the public, as you can see. If anyone has any concerns over any current or future PUDs or building projects in town, we would like to hear from you at Planning and Zoning. Meetings are on the 2nd and the 4th Wednesdays of the month at 6:30 p.m. Notices are posted on the town building on the front and the back of the building. And if you have any other questions, you can always call Madison or Scott and they can help. And if all of you on the commission can kind of pass that around, that would be great. So there's no confusion as that, and there is no reservation needed. Okay. Anybody else from commission have anything to say? No? Okay. Next we have Greg Gastineau, Greg G. NIAP. Is it NIAP or NAIAP? NAIAP,
Can I just say a few words to intro and then we'll let,
of course you can.
okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So NIAP, which is the Commercial Real Estate Associate or Developers Association. I'm not sure how that turns into NIAP, but it's something that the town was turned on to, I don't know how many months ago, Michelle, about 6 months ago or 7 months ago. Yeah. So this is a group that is associated with the Rocky Mountain Real Estate Challenge, which pits students, graduate students from University of Colorado Boulder against DU every year. And they compete in a real estate development challenge. So they look at a site and they analyze it from the standpoint of site planning, market analysis, what should be built on the site. They do financial analyses, basically as a real developer would. That's the whole point of that competition, and it kind of tests their mettle after coming through a real estate development program. We were told that this organization existed. We got in contact with these folks. Morgan Landers was the one that told us about this. We put our hat in the ring. NIAP had never done a challenge anywhere really outside of the metro area of Denver. So this was, I think, one of the first, if not the first, opportunities for the students to do a site outside of the Front Range. We were selected, and then we went through a process over the winter, I guess what was it, January, we started having interviews with the students. And they then were let loose to really start looking at Dow Junction was the site that was chosen. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have them do this was in the past, the Planning Commission certainly has talked about redevelopment of Dow Junction in the past. In the past, the town has issued requests for proposals from developers to approach the town for redevelopment of Dow Junction. There were 2 or 3 or 4 core principles in that RFP process: maintaining access to Meadow Mountain, providing sustainable revenue generation, so sales tax generating uses, lodging, a transportation center, or some type of transportation hub that would work with the local transit authorities. So those were kind of the core components. As I got more involved in some of those discussions with Michelle and members from the council and would-be developers who were still kind of in the process, I was kind of waving a white flag saying, hey, we really probably should, if the developer is going to come through a PUD process, that's great. But we probably need to do some market analysis to find out what really will work on that site. What's most appropriate for the town? If we keep those core principles in mind, what actually is going to work? And so NIOP provided the town a fairly cost-effective means to really have a bunch of different students who generally have a lot more creativity than some folks that have been doing things for a while, look at it and do those same types of things. So Michelle, am I doing this justice? Is this okay? So, I mean, that's how we got here. I think the result was amazing. We had, how many teams total? Was 6 or 8? Yep, okay. And then there was a winner chosen at the end of April, but looking at what all the different student groups brought forth and the different rounds of competition, there were 2 rounds, kind of an elimination round and then a final round. I think the town got what it really needed and asked for, which were different perspectives, different takes on what that area could look like and what could work on that site. And as you may or may not know, that is a property that's owned by the federal government. It's the U.S. Forest Service. So the Forest Service is going to be involved in the future, whether it's a lease agreement with a developer or a sale arrangement and they dispose of the property. But having this information going into any future requests for proposals from developers is really valuable for the town. So I think we all have a better understanding of what the market really would bear for that site and what could work from a physical standpoint, from a massing standpoint, those types of things. So Greg participated in that as a judge because of his expertise and experience as a commercial developer. And so we thought it would be good to kind of bring you up to speed on what that process was, what we've been talking about for months, how it turned out, and from Greg's perspective, kind of being behind the scenes as a judge, what he saw and what he might have. I don't want to go too far here, Greg, but we'd love to hear your insight as to the process, what you experienced, and what you think where we're headed with this. So thank you, Lynn.
Name and address, please.
Gastineau, 421 Main Street. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
To attend. And yeah, as Scott said, I was picked to be a judge. Thank you to Michelle and I believe Scott for throwing my hat in the ring. I don't know that I had much of a choice, but it was really a cool experience. I went to architecture school at CU Boulder, and although I was just an undergrad, we had to present to judges and panels of professionals, and so it was really cool for me to be on the other side of that, kind of have a different perspective. And obviously, because I live in the community, I had a vested interest in the topic. So I think first and foremost, these are graduate students, and they impressed the hell out of me. It was different than what I was expecting, in the sense of, again, my background being more like, let's create pretty pictures and what could look cool. I mean, these kids are doing full and, financial analysis and waterfall equity distributions, and it's just really, really impressive. But at the same time, I think we all have to remember that these are graduate students, and the reality of what is going to happen down there and what they're proposing, are going to be far apart. I think a good point to that is DU's winning submittal. They made it to the finals with this particular group. I think it was the station at Whiskey Creek. Their total budget was 180 million.
Oh.
I think. I mean, it was like, all right, I don't know who you're going to go to. What lender you're going to go to? Who is your equity partner? Who's coming to the table with $50 million? So I think again, you have to take these projects with a bit of a grain of salt, but at the same time, like Scott said, I mean, they do have a very clean palette and a wild imagination. And so some of the ideas that they came up with, we on the judges side of things and in the judges room, we were impressed by. I can't say that, any one project, this was not the winning project, by the way, this was DU's submittal. Even CU's winning project, I can't stand here and say that would be built, and that's a successful project. But I think what it shows, it demonstrates to the community at large, and certainly to you guys as board members, is given the price of the land, where were we, like 5? Given a $5 million land acquisition cost, this shows you, it gives you a good idea what has to occur to make that land cost make any sense. Again, if you're going to be going to a lender, which any project's going to need a bank, the banks are going to go through your financial analysis with a fine-tooth comb. And if it doesn't, show that it's going to make money, and they're not going to put their money behind it. So again, we can all dream about, what we'd like to see there, but it has to make sense. So I think that's one aspect of this exercise that I think was incredibly beneficial, to give the perspective of, what does a large scale development look like down there? This was the winning submittal from CU. And I thought that they did a very creative job. We all loved like their placemaking ideas, and that water tower was fantastic. We sort of envisioned that being lit up at night, and you could see that from I-70. And hey, what's happening over there? But the building that you see here, and I don't know if you can scroll through that, Madison, scroll through their pages, but they did a really good job of hiding the scale of that building. In fact, I don't even know that you're going to see it other than in plan view. That's a massive building. I mean, I would put that on scale with maybe, what do they call the Cascade now?
Hyatt.
Hyatt.
The Grand Hyatt.
Grand Hyatt.
It's a big building. So again, I think these guys were skilled in that all of their drawings, all of their perspectives hid that building. It really, they knew they needed it for the financial aspect, but the rest of their project is really what gave them the winning vote. They just seemed to understand the placemaking, that Minturn was going to be unique and kind of funky, and we didn't want it to look like just anything. I think they did a good job of incorporating a transportation center. But I think both groups, one of the things, I know, Lynn, you listened in
Mhm.
the competition, and Michelle was there. I'm not sure if others of you had listened in on that or not, but it became apparent that the teams didn't necessarily realize the extent of the public's use of that parking area to access Meadow Mountain. And if you look at some of these site plans and this massive development, and you say, okay, well, where are the three guys with their, pickup trucks and snowmobile trailers going to go, and where are the horse trailers going to go with, the Boy Scout kids and things like that. So again, nothing was perfect here, but I think there were a lot of really unique things that perhaps, should be discussed further. Again, like their entrance to the transportation center, sort of looping around this kind of iconic water tower. Everybody loved that. They had incorporated a transportation center and a meeting hall. Both groups included amphitheaters. And I think I asked at the time, if they were aware of the fact that we had a very successful
You did.
amphitheater.
You did ask that.
So that was one that I think they just missed. For some reason, both groups thought that that was, a great amenity to have there. And not to say that it wouldn't be, but I think if given the choice, you're going to choose Little Beach over this. But yeah, there's a good shot of the large building in the back that they put on pedestal parking. So, again, I think there are little bits and pieces that we can glean from this and say, I think we should pursue something like this further, take a look at this. The idea of like these glamping tents or the food truck corral, doing the things that all the other communities in the valley are saying no to. I thought that was kind of a unique example of what the CU kids talked about. I guess first I should ask if anyone has any questions.
Wasn't there one of the buildings, and maybe it was where the food was, that was supposed to remind us of the Roundhouse?
Yeah, I think that was their interpretation here in this meeting hall.
Mhm.
With the architecture design, and they had some things inside that might hearken to that or show some historical photographs and things.
Greg, could you touch on that a little bit? Because that was one of the parts in being in the judges' room that I found fascinating, was the judges really picking apart what would or would not work on a long-term viability scale from a retail perspective.
Yeah. Again, this was a number of months ago, and unfortunately I couldn't find my notes. I wanted to find my notes so I could kind of talk about specifics, but the judges were really tough, tougher than I was, planning on being. And again, I've been on the other side of the table, so I think I was taking a softer approach. But it was amazing to me how some of the judges really dove into. The example that sticks out the most was the DU proposal, the second place proposal. I think they were selling like 177 condominium units. That's just a number off the top of my head. I think that's roughly what it was. And someone had gone through all their line item in their budget and realized that they had no marketing expense and no real estate brokerage commissions to pay. And $177 million, that's millions in costs that they missed. And so that's what judges were kind of focusing on. Let's beat these kids up, over their financial analysis. And I was kind of not taking that approach. But in terms of, what we think would work, what we think is viable, I think both groups included hotel components, and everyone had agreed that it's an ideal site for a hotel. Maybe something more mid-priced. We don't need a St. Regis down here, but and then the notion of these food hall users, because I think one group, if I'm not mistaken, had like a food truck corral, and one group had the internal in the meeting space. I think you could have little stalls, if you will, and lease those out to shop owners and things. And the question was, how many small shops, how many small shop users are out there, and could they afford to pay the rents that were being proposed? And again, these are graduate level students, and they're saying, okay, well, it's going to cost me $170 million to build this thing. How am I going to cover those costs? Well, we'll just ask for $90 a foot in rent. those are the kind of things that, it's like, I understand where you're coming from. I see why you're saying that you need this rent to cover your costs, but I'm going to share with you that the town and interns commercial real estate rates are in the teens. So, that's not happening. It's this big juggling act. And again, I apologize. I don't want to babble on, but that was kind of my takeaway was I think there are some really cool things that we could learn from a, what do we want to see there amenity wise, the scale of things. But I think we need to be cautious about a $5 million land cost. Yeah.
Wasn't there some talk about a small grocery store named Clark's? How did they feel about that?
Clark's had expressed interest. I guess they're actively looking and they want to be up here. I can't remember what their footprint is, maybe 7,000 feet or something. It's a relatively small market. But even their rents, it wouldn't justify, based on what I saw, I don't think you could go in there and build a Clark's Market because they only pay a small rent rate. Most grocery stores pay very little rent. It's the other guys that pick up the slack. It's the strip center that you see next to Safeway. They're the ones that are covering the costs. So if a Clark's were to come in, they're not going to be big rent payers and they're going to rely on other retailers to kind of come in and pay, again, these $40 rates that probably won't make sense, at least not now. I mean, maybe somewhere down the line that will. There is something that I think I would like to introduce or just I'm going to throw it out there, open up a can of worms, perhaps. I think it was like 30 years ago. There was an attorney in Boulder who wrote the enabling legislation in the state of Colorado for transferable development rights. And I was actually involved in the first project in the state that used them. And it was unusual in that this was just a large parcel of land and we shifted density from one side to another to protect an elk migration corridor. But it was a shifting of transferable rights. Okay, this area is now stripped of rights and you have double the density here. I noticed that Pitkin County has a program. Summit County has a program. Summit County is currently getting about $100,000 per unit. That's the bank value of a unit of development right. So I started to look at this saying, if this type of density scares us, which it might, is there a TDR program that's worth exploring? Where, if you just counted up how many units were proposed here, let's just say it's 300. It's a lot of money to pay down the cost of your acquisition. If you could sell 300 units at $100,000 a piece to knock down your cost. I think it's going to be more than 300 units, to be honest, if you really went through the calculation. But I think that that's something worth exploring. I don't know that it's ever been done in Eagle County.
We tried.
They tried?
When I was working, or no, actually, if I left, so in the early ages after I just left the county, I had a client that was trying to do that. The problem is finding a receiving area. It was
An
the
appropriate
receiving area. It wasn't the TDR program that was the problem. It's that no one wanted to go, well, we don't really want to take in your density.
Yeah.
And that was problematic because obviously the most logical places were in the towns.
Right.
And so they have to have that mentality to accept it.
And then I worked on it for 4 years at Eagle County
Oh, you
and got nowhere.
Yeah.
But, to your point, Greg, there is no density approved for this site. And we're hoping that someone comes to the town with density to approve for the site, if it's in the form of lodging that we can get lodging tax from. And, it seemed there's certainly interest in workforce housing. The town has talked with Town of Vale about some kind of partnership there. So I think, that was, one of the goals. We kept it pretty simple, revenue generation, possibly some workforce housing, transportation amenities or some kind of transportation center, and access to Meadow Mountain.
Mhm.
and respecting that. And, you know, the questions we fielded from every one of the teams over the course of a month or so in different interview sessions was, a lot of them had to do with, well, how much density do you think you want? Or how tall do you think your buildings can go? And, you know, the answer was, well, this is a very unique site. It is not, you know, of all the places in Minturn, this is where we would want to allow ourselves some additional height and some additional bulk and mass. That said, you, the students, and your architectural advisors, you need to pay really close attention to what you see in Minturn. And, you know, if you've got bulk and mass, how do you address that through roof forms and building forms and funkiness and all that stuff? And I don't know if I certainly didn't see that in most of the proposals. There was a lot of big, somewhat monolithic buildings in some proposals. This one, I agree with you. I think they did a great job of the placemaking, integrating that with some of the building forms and how that integrates with the site. And, you know, to your point, I think, you know, we got some interesting ideas and a better idea of what won't work. And I think, like Michelle, I wanted to hear from your perspective, being in that kind of back room with the judges, what some of the critiques were on the things that won't work and why they won't work. So we can have a better picture as we, you know, if the planning commission is involved at some point reviewing a PUD, or if we take the route of, you know, talking about what we've learned from this and where we still are as a town as far as what our RFP might look like to the next set of developers that we want to invite. You know, how can we just be a little more wide-eyed about, well, this would be great, but it's not going to pencil. So we need to temper our enthusiasm for that, or find you know, some creative solutions to make those things pencil. I did not see many of the proposals really get into, you know, beyond structured parking. There was no connection between structured parking and a transfer station for transit or something like that, right? You mentioned Meadow Mountain and access and parking for vehicles with trailers and things like that. Those things kind of got shoved to the little bitty pieces. And
Well, and as did the wetlands. You know, I think
Yeah.
that's worth pointing out, that the students were told to disregard the wetlands for the exercise. And I think that was based on an assumption that they could work with the state Corps of Engineers and do, you know, a relocation or a, yeah, something to that effect. So it's just worth noting that they didn't really take that into account in any way.
Water was also not taken into account.
And water was not taken into account. Yeah, you know, again, I just think it's
There's no water on that.
Because it can't take account.
it's a good education. It's a good first look. But you know, I think it's just wise for everyone to keep in mind it's a student project. So, you know, the realities of things and the creativity of students don't always, you know, mesh together. But there's aspects of it that I think are very viable. I think Clark's Market is a great. I think we'd all love to see, you know, something like that.
Yeah, I think one of the things they said was they were worried whether the town of Minturn could carry even the Clark's Market, but I don't know if they realize what the Leadville 100 does either. And people coming and going in the morning might be able to stop in there, people from the highway. And with the possibilities of the development in this town, I certainly think a small market could be.
If it's a good market, it'll pull regionally. I mean, I actually know someone, I just learned of this recently. I have a friend who lives in Singletree, and she shops in Lion's Head at that little market that they built right across from the parking structure, because she thinks it's the best grocery in the valley. So if it's good enough, I think people travel.
Now, one of the major markets that was in this town when I moved here was the Village Market when it was in Crossroads. And that was not a big market.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, Tom,
Hey, Tom.
how are you?
Good, buddy. How are
Hey,
you?
I was half joking a couple months ago with folks, but not really. I even sent a piece to them. it'd be nice to have this kind of horsepower to put a package together and submit to Trader Joe's. If we want to talk about a magnet store that's going to gravitate people from all over, as well as our area meets their demographic requirement and their strategic store development outlook, which is roughly 30 to 40 stores a year. We're right in there along with our rather unique situation, location, 4 points of the compasses, if you will. And more to the point of maybe bringing the scale down a little bit, but at the same time, a store that generates a continual level of revenue and tax revenue that I think would be pretty beneficial for a lot of folks beyond just a small mom and pop type grocery store that can actually afford either option, you know, reducing the cost and or that 5 million price tag, maybe a couple other stores to offset that. But something as simple as a Trader's, get them out of the Front Range and up the hill. They won't go to Summit due to Whole Foods, but I don't see how Eagle is necessarily a bad option. So just a thought.
No, it's a great thought. And certainly I think other people have had that same, you know, wish list. Strange, but true. Trader Joe's real estate department exists in a little office in Vail. For the last 25 years, every single Trader Joe's west of the Mississippi has gone through a tiny little office in Vail Village. It's an old business partner of mine, and he's their senior real estate director. And he told me point blank, it's not happening. You know, that they're not coming up here.
Is that due mostly logistical lines or what?
I think it relates to their trucking and deliveries. Yeah.
Right next
Right.
to the
I mean, logic with these guys is really thrown out the window. And I'm being 100% truthful. We deal with so many retailers, national retailers, who are so stuck in a box about their demographics. And if you don't tick the boxes, you know, they don't come.
Yeah.
Or they demand too much.
Yeah.
Like the Whole Foods on the Roaring Fork side. That
Right.
was a battle because they demanded way more parking than
Oh,
was needed, and they
well, I'm
wanted
sure
it
they did
set
the
this
same thing in
way,
Summit
wanted them
County with
access
that.
point, yeah,
So,
they're very demanding.
yeah, and it's funny because it's real. Trader Joe's real estate guy is here, and their real estate attorney lives here too.
And they don't want a Trader's in their backyard? That's a little
Trust me,
flawed.
they would love to have it. It's not their decision.
So it's a supply issue. It's definitely not a demand issue.
Again, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
That's just my understanding. And
I figure they could revisit their supply hub down valley. That was the logic. You're not running two passes unless you're emanating everything out of Denver.
Yeah.
But either way, just a thought.
Yeah.
Just a question for you, Greg. What's the process for like pitching this to a company like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or whatever?
Yeah, it's really pretty easy. I mean, most of the big companies, the big retailers, if you go on their websites, there's like a contact us, you know, and you'll find the real estate submittal, and it's an email or a phone number, and you can shoot them things. Rarely will they respond to, you know, hey, I have this 5-acre parcel. What do you think? But if you send them something like, hey, we have this project and here's a 14,000 foot pad that'll be perfect for your building, you know, that's stuff that they look at. So it can't just be a general, what do you think of the area?
Right.
If you show them a specific project, then they respond. And again,
Would it be possible to reopen this conversation with our friends at Trader Joe's in Vail?
I could certainly ask. I could ask them if they would come in and talk to you guys. My guess is, well, there's a 50-50 chance that they would do it. But I'm afraid I'm just guessing you're going to hear the same thing that I'm saying. But
Those odds are good in Vegas. I'll take it.
yeah. You know, I think things have certainly changed up here. When Pier 1 came up, that was a big deal. When Walgreens came up, you know, that was a big deal. These are, you know, groups that have very specific demographic requirements, and you know, Pier 1 is failing, but Walgreens is doing fine. So maybe it's opened the eyes to some of these other retailers that, you know what, guys, don't look at, don't throw 1 mile, 3 mile, 5-mile radius circle around Vale Village, because that's not how our population sits, you know. If you can throw a big rectangle down the valley and look at it that way, you know, might be a different approach. I don't know, am I offering anything good here? Or am I just sort of babbling?
No, absolutely. Great discussion. Just, you know, I think the way we envision moving forward is for the town to go, you know, kind of back to the RFP drawing table and reissue an RFP for developers who would then go out and get Trader Joe's or Clark's or whoever. You know, if the RFP is specific enough and it's based in part on what we've learned from this process.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you could say in your RFP that, you know, the town is desirous of a grocery store between 9,000 and, you know, 15,000 feet. There's going to be 3
Right.
of them. So.
What would the timing be on the exchange, the land to come to Minturn? How long does it take to convey?
could take a while, but we have had meetings with the Forest Service recently. They understand and are aware of this, what we just went through. And Michelle, do you want to speak to that?
It is a multi-year process. So the Forest Service is federal. So they have a list, I think it's of 64 steps that you have to go through if you want to do an acquisition by sale. Yep. And some of the other options we're looking at is a lease option. So we're in discussions right now with the Forest Service on what they need for their future needs for administrative and maintenance, as well as their housing needs, because they have housing needs too. Included in those conversations will be Vale on how they might be able to contribute to some workforce housing needs of the region. And possibly Eagle County, who has land in Eagle that might play a role in the relocation of the Forest Service. So there's a bunch of pieces going on all simultaneously. And unfortunately, they're all governments, which just adds red tape to everything. So I'm expecting multiple years in order to get this accomplished.
All right.
It has to go through Congress.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it up in the air, but usually I only see it to the point where they've got it out, you know, who's interested in buying or trading.
Right.
So I missed the beginning of how long it took to get to that
Right.
point.
So our most recent meeting with the Forest Service indicated that they would be supportive of Minturn putting out an RFP. And we've reached out to other surrounding communities, you know, notifying them that, hey, we're looking at doing this RFP. We're probably going to put it out sometime this fall, is my guess.
Is it too much of a cart before the horse? So if it takes 5 years and based on the real estate market and the building materials market, and you have this RFP, and the time you get there, it's almost kind of outdated.
I say no, because the critical step is having the financial partner that's required in the RFP. Since the town of Minturn doesn't, so the town of Minturn is able to purchase this land
Right.
at market, at appraised price. It's not at market value. So in order to do that, though, we don't have the money to purchase it at appraised value. So we have to find a financial partner.
Got it.
And so that's where we have to start now and be flexible down the road of what this, you know, PUD would look like, but giving our requirements on what our end goals are. And what I've heard from the council is the need for this site to have long-term viability
Oh, totally.
and not see, you know, the empty storefronts. And what we heard with the judges in this competition is retail is really tough in this location. They did think some type of a grocer could potentially work, but they were not very supportive of small retail shops. I mean, not being a developer, I wasn't expecting that. They were much more supportive of lodging, those types of revenue options, especially given that we're so committed to leaving public access open to Meadow Mountain, as well as the regional transit hub. So other discussions taking place are, you know, talking to Vale about what about Vale's buses coming down here to, if there's workforce housing, pick up, you know, make that trip, things like that. So we're trying to figure out how this can be long-term viable, vibrant location, giving it that it's at the front entrance of town.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, I hope the town gets it regardless. And even if they're a 51% owner in it, and then your other partners, you know, are less than that, to give Minturn the governing final say. You know, that's great.
Right.
We should be partnering it more.
A question about sort of financing this, is this something that you could sort of issue like municipal bonds for, or is that not to raise capital? I'm just throwing it out there.
Right. I don't think Minturn would look into that.
Okay.
What Minturn would look to do is Minturn would look to purchase the property from the Forest Service with whatever the Forest Service needs are, whatever their specs are. If they stay there, if they move, whatever that is. And then it would probably be pretty much a simultaneous sale to the developer with the agreements in place that A, B, and C will occur through a PUD process that goes through the commission and council.
One of the things that we asked the students to consider, I think all of them did, and just as a necessary component of their financing package was creation of a district or districts. So either a public improvement district, a tax increment finance district. I don't think any of them proposed a metro district, which I don't think we'd want anyways. Some of them asked the town pretty pointed, would you give a holiday on use tax or other things like that? They were trying to think of creative ways to do just what you're saying, Elliot, is, how do you pay for the infrastructure and stuff like that? So Greg, do you have any insight on some of that?
Well, I think the one thing I just heard Michelle say that I would caution you about is if you get into a long-term lease situation, that will muddy your financing out. Reconsider-
That was a very brief discussion.
Okay.
In that the federal government has 3 options that you can go for, and the lease was one of them, but that was a concern.
Yeah, because even if you do like a 99-year land lease,
Yeah.
the banks don't like those. So that's always challenging. But that's again, the financing of something like this, given the numbers that these students had come up with, I mean, it's a big ask. It's a really big ask. I don't know. I didn't see returns in either of the proposals that would make me want to reach out to any of, kind of the money people that we use, put it that way. And usually you got to see some pretty good returns for these guys to fork out $50 million. So that's my take. If I can offer anything along the way, other insight, I'm sorry I couldn't find my notes to be more specific about.
Oh, Greg, thank you
Things,
so much.
But I'm happy to come back and offer anything I can help with.
Jeff, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you. Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming tonight. A couple just quick questions. Michelle, you said that if we were to buy the property, we would be paying appraised value, not market value, correct?
That's correct.
And do we know what the appraised value is?
We knew what the appraised value is a couple years ago, and the Forest
Right.
Service doesn't accept an appraised value over 12 months old. So we would have to get a new appraisal.
Any idea ballpark?
I wasn't looking to say it publicly.
Strike that from the record. The other question was just kind of to dovetail off of Tom's comment about supply chain. Maybe as if and when we get to the next RFPs, maybe we look, if we're going to throw in grocers or really, I guess, any other type of supply chain type company that needs supply chain like that, maybe we look west or like to California, or we keep those, try to see if there's retailers that, come from that side of the country versus, or their supply chain comes from that side of the country more than East Coast, or maybe that makes a difference. Maybe that's an Achilles heel to some real, some companies.
That was actually the reason why Trader Joe's ended up coming to Colorado, was that they built a distribution facility, I think, in North Texas. And that's what gave them the ability to serve us where they couldn't before. So, yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe there's opportunity.
Maybe there's something in there. But thank you.
Yeah, one follow-up on that. I know we need to move on, but just out of feasibility based on your experience, Greg, to keep hammering on the traders aspect, specifically the last town to put in from a municipal standpoint was Lehigh, Pennsylvania. They made their pitch based on industry, AMI, et cetera. So that specific property at Dowd, considering the Forest Service, and the 800-pound financial gorilla in the room, which would be Vail. So if you consider the demands of those two entities, specifically workforce housing for both Vail and the Forest Service, what is the possibility of essentially a lease back and financing from Vail as well, plus bringing in traders? So essentially you have three entities there. You've got traders, you've got workforce housing from Vail, and a lease back to the Forest Service for housing for them as well. Is that even in the possibilities legally, considering you're crossing the threshold of federal entity that's leasing back property they just sold, as well as obviously the commercial option of Vail, and then traders rather weird, distinctive marketing requirements?
Yeah, I mean, traders, they don't come to the money, they don't come to the table with money. It's like you wave money at them and bring them in.
And that's where I figured Vail might fit into that equation.
Yeah, but I don't know what the benefit to Vail would be to do that.
To the demographics that service Beaver, well, really Summit County, Vail, Beaver Creek, et cetera, their piece of that pie.
Yeah. No, I think, listen, I don't want to discourage anyone from, making a pitch. Times have changed up here. I mean, the population is not getting any smaller. And so, maybe things have changed and these guys are willing to take a look at these things, but
Because I just want to stay away from competition with City Market and Safeway, which I don't think Traders falls in that category.
no,
or
they
something.
they like to go next to those guys.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to get a hotel. There's no question. A mid-priced hotel, this site is an absolute no-brainer.
Sure.
And I think if you could build a building that combines workforce housing and the hotel component in it, where they're on separate floors, maybe they have separate entrances, but they can share, a structure and keep costs down, and perhaps they could share structured parking, and maybe that's somehow integrated into the bus system. So a kid in the workforce housing goes down the elevator and catches the bus and he goes to work. Those were the things that we discussed in the judges panel. Like, those things are obvious. That makes sense. A transportation hub, the way this property sits in the valley, it's an absolute no-brainer. Mid-priced hotel, no-brainer. Workforce housing, obviously there's a need for it, but how do you justify the costs?
Well, considering the headache they're going through with Booth Heights, I just figured this is a much less contentious type situation
Oh, yeah.
that addresses an immediate need.
Appropriate site. I think it's
Sure.
an appropriate site for development.
Yeah.
So.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I don't think there's any major hurdles. I think it would be attractive to a lot of retailers. I think, it's a good story to tell. It's great highway visibility. I don't even know what the traffic counts are on I-70. I mean, what do they get? 60, 70,000 cars a day?
Not quite that many, but
Okay, 40, maybe 40,000 cars a day. I mean, retailers would kill for that sort of visibility. So, I don't think it's just finding the right ones, and a developer who's perhaps more patient on their returns, because it's going to be a while. So,
Cool. Thanks for your time.
Is there sort of like a cheat sheet packet? So I could, someone could say, hey, Trader Joe's, what do you think? To your point, like a little, as opposed to X amount of square feet, would you be interested in building here? With sort of a, just a one sheeter that we could be like, is this something that tickles your fancy? You know what I mean? Is that something that you'd like to potentially develop or add to your portfolio or whatever? Is there anything like that?
no.
Okay.
I think we would, again, look to a developer who's responding to an RFP for this development to be doing that kind of work.
Okay.
and he's going to choose the broker, and the broker are the ones that have all the connections.
Right.
So if they choose the right broker, they'll get to the right people.
Right.
And they're the ones that know. They do like void analysis where they look at the whole area and
Right.
see what things are missing, and they know who the rent payers are and who's not.
Right.
Maybe when we send the RFP out, we should send like a gift certificate to Trader Joe's with the RFP. Hint.
It's a great idea. All right, guys. Well,
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks,
thank
Greg.
you.
Thanks, Greg.
And thank you for all that you do. Appreciate you being on board.
Good night, Greg. Next on the agenda is 152 Main, the Agora edition. Scott,
I just like saying Agora.
do we know what it means?
We're going to find out what it means.
Okay.
It's a
Thank you,
great
Madam
term.
Chair. I'm not going to muddy this one up too much, but as you may have noticed, there is an Agora that has been constructed at 152 Main, otherwise known as the parking area between Helen's house and Frank's house. And so this is something that the town has been talking about. This is something that Larry has come before the Planning Commission and said, hey, what do you guys think about these kind of ideas? This is also something, as a gathering place that the town has gone after and secured funding from the state during COVID to create outdoor seating areas and safe environments for folks. I don't know what the status of our grant is or whether we're going to be able to use some of that money moving forward, but yeah, in the interim, this was something that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Larry or Kelly, that you did approach the town about, and there was some acknowledgement that it was going to be happening. I think at this, when we saw what was being constructed, we thought it was a little more than what we had thought was going to be constructed. So we've asked Larry and Kelly to come and present to us, just so we're all on the same page. It's coming through a process with the Design Review Board because it is essentially an improvement or a development, which that's in your purview. And we're also working with Jerry Long, our building inspector, to make sure that if necessary, building permits are issued in kind of retroactive manner and inspections happen. But it's something that the staff is certainly supporting. I think Larry and Kelly and everyone who volunteered to put this together in short order did a wonderful job. It obviously has created a very welcoming space that's being well used. So, certainly thank you for investing the time and vision in doing this. And thanks for being here tonight, just so we can make sure you guys go through a process and we're all aware of what was constructed and we're all okay with it. So is that enough of an intro? Okay. Larry, Kelly, do you want to step up to Mike, give your name and address and tell us about the project?
Larry Stone, 152 Main Street. Kelly Toon, 531 Main Street. So briefly, to give you a history of where Jane and I had a vision for the property, I'll be very brief. When we chose to renovate the old house, it was a toss-up of, you just fix it up a little bit and keep it as a long-term rental, or do you really put the effort into making it something that's more a part of the viability of downtown? And Greg just left, but when sitting on the EDAC committee, I remember a very loud voice in my head when he said, we don't have a corridor from Main Street to the river, except for the alleys on the end. And looking across all of the properties on the 100 block, it was like, well, there you have a potential. When I looked at the cost of doing some sort of building, and I even thought of scrapping that house, and thanks to Kelly's reverence for the historic on that. And I think for Jane and I, we wanted to contribute in some way. She's an artist and a bit of a gypsy, and she has imagined inviting different artisans coming out and doing pop-ups or different things with the space. So we did not have a very clear plan, but we knew that in how we function in our business, and almost like an artist would painting something, you just taking steps towards a vision. And so we took advantage of the pandemic time, and we continued to work on things around the property. And when I was sitting at the cafe and heard that the restaurants were looking for outdoor seating, I said, well, what about the space that we have in the driveway? I mean, it's an ideal spot. So that's where this began. And so, of course, I suggested Kelly because he's very skilled at making something out of nothing. So that's where we brought Kelly into the equation. Jane and I offered the space, and it was Ally and Doug who hired you to come in and work on the space. So our agreement with Kelly and Doug, and for Patty, because we went to talk to Patty at the Thai Kitchen, was if you guys want to use your revenue sources to come and pay for what it's going to take to do this, then you can use the space for whatever you want. Since it's been created, and by the way, we took this to Cindy and Jay, and it was all very transparent, and open, and the drawings that Kelly did is pretty much what's over there now. I think it just was overwhelming when Cindy walked by and she's like, yeah, I think maybe we should have gone through the design and review before this was built. So we were more than happy to do and address whatever your concerns were, and are. So I was approached by one of the restaurants to lease the space. And I said, no, that's not in the interest of what Jane and I have in mind. We really love the concept of it being a true community space. And I've sat in there with people that have brought in food from the Rocky Taco and the Thai Kitchen and really all of the restaurants around. No one's come in from the Country Club, I don't think, because you do your own thing there. But with the current laws, the way that they are, it's nice that people can order from Patty and get a beer and some pot stickers, and someone else in their party can go over and get something else from another restaurant. And we really love it. And I think in short order, for Jane and I, it fits the model of what we'd like to see continue happening there. We're trying to work out some of the details of keeping the flowers watered and keeping the recycling and the trash out, and cleaning tables. Patty and Doug both have said they could work out a coordinating schedule, so we're working on those things. But in short, I'm really thrilled. I've heard a lot of positive comments about it, and owe a great deal of gratitude for Kelly's vision and skills, and he and Jane when they come together. I don't know, I think it looks pretty cool. It looks like Minturn. So if you have any questions for me, I'm available. Do you have anything to add?
So yeah, it's been an interesting collaboration between multiple property owners, but I think that's what a small community is about. It just hasn't been done anywhere locally. I have done a lot of travels, and I analyze space when I visit spaces. I have a degree in architecture from Cal Poly, so I always analyze how people use spaces and what things are successful. This is loosely, it's based on some places I've been in California and Denver that are extremely popular with the small local communities. They're kind of beer garden spaces, just made out of cheap materials. So you're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if it doesn't work, people aren't losing their shirt over this. But the space itself is the important thing, not what you spend on it, and just creating something fun. And I don't know how many times I've heard the word funky about Minturn. I truly believe this is probably one of the only things that's been built, even though we keep using it in almost every single meeting, and every single thing that gets built is pretty boring, to be honest. So this was my kind of like, hey, this is what can happen, and is it to be accepted? I watch people drive down the street and their heads just turn and they smile. I haven't personally heard anything negative, but I do think it's going to take a while for people to understand what it is, and they're approaching us asking what it is. which, an agora, by the way, is a term most architect students are familiar with. It's a meeting, gathering, marketplace in ancient Italy and Greece. And it was kind of like the farmer's market, basically, but it was also where just everyone came to meet and talk and gather. So that's kind of where that came from. Finn's Manor in Rhino District is one of the things that really influenced me, and it's made out of scaffolding, a bar, and kind of food trucks, and just benches. And it's just simple, and it is used it's just every night the place is packed, and they have little musicians playing. People just go there to do work. And I was lucky enough to see that in other places throughout California in my travels. So in Buena Vista, everyone keeps saying like, oh, this is like Salida or Buena Vista, which are huge draws for tourists. And I wasn't sure if we were a tourist town or just a sleepy community, but after last year and watching how many people flocked to this place during COVID, and there's almost nothing to do here, but they still flocked here. And I'm seeing the traffic. I think it was a good decision to go through with this, and just to create a place for people, something to do besides just walk the sidewalks. They can actually sit down, and we don't have any garden spaces to speak of except for a saloon, maybe Wolcott Yacht Club, which will be coming back this year, I think. And then structurally, I did analyze some things that got built last year during COVID, and in the details, I beat things up just because I saw what failed last year throughout people's rush to throw stuff up for COVID patio spaces, and I didn't want mine to fail. So in defense, that's anything that got beefed up was just for security reasons, and structural security. Any questions?
I have one. Is this temporary or permanent? And if it's permanent, what do you do with it in the winter?
So the whole structure is designed to be taken down in an afternoon if we had to, and turn it back into a parking lot. The sunshades all retract with just a pulley system. No electricity is needed, just one person can retract everything in case we get a snowstorm in August, to reduce the snow loads and all that. We tested it out through the 1 or 2 rainstorms that we had, and I'm working on the final details. It's about 95% figured out, and I'm still, now that I'm seeing how it works in the wind, and we've had some very high winds, and it's done fabulous. And the whole thing's meant to retract for safety in the winter time and be pulled back to the house.
I should
And
probably answer. The only part that's not temporary to it, and it can be temporary as all things are, but we buried 20-foot poles. I think we cut off maybe 2 feet, and we buried them 4.5 to 5 feet deep in concrete for security purposes. I would prefer to leave those up in the event that we want to do that again next year, but everything else comes out of there.
So you take back your parking for the Airbnb
Correct.
and your snow storage.
Mainly, I take back parking for Frank. I mean, that's the real deal. There's ample parking on there for the Airbnb clients and for Frank, and snow storage. I've gone through a few winters with it and have managed very well. And there is also parking in the rear of the property as well. So that's,
How many spaces are back there?
there are 3 spaces. So
I just have one kind of funny thing to say, and it doesn't directly relate to you, but I had 2 people walk in today, and the woman walks up to the counter and she goes, "Where am I?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think?" "Well, I love this town, but I don't know where I am." And I thought, okay, well, you're an intern college, and I went through a little spiel on how we got started with the railroad and the mines and everything like that. But I thought that's the kind of people that come here, because they stop because of what they see and they love it. And she's like, "Where are we?"
I think it's true, Len. I think a lot of people, I've had people come back to the scarab space because of that statue that I call Bridge that has the antlers.
You call him who?
I call him Bridge.
Ridge.
Yeah, he's an industrial waste creation in the shape of a man, but with antlers that represents nature. And he has knobs on him that is kind of how we tweak ourselves as human beings in relationship to nature and where we are. So the artist entitled him Bridge, and so I call him Bridge. But people will turn around and come back, stop and take pictures of that. The most photographed thing in town is Frank's blue car Geronimo. And so, I felt,
It is.
Frank's health is not as great as it was. And
No, it's not.
he asked where he could park Geronimo. And I said, well, you're going to have to move it. And if you need help, let me know. But, you can park it in front of my house if you want, but it's public parking and you've got to move it. So that's where he's parked it. And I'm fine with it personally, and I'm happy to help him, but I haven't seen it move. So.
No, it hasn't, but people still take pictures of the stuffed animals coming out of the hole. Yeah.
The talking point, and I've seen people come by and look at the space and turn around, and I need to come and see Madison about getting approval for a sign, because no one knows what an agora is. No one knows what that space is. So I've gone to the different restaurants and said, hey, if you could put your website, or if you have an app or some way that you can put this on the tables, multiple menus, just something that where people are aware that they can come and order food from you and then go pick it up. So that's our goal. And we want to see how it works this year. And to fully answer your question, if it's not successful, then we won't do it next year. But if the community finds it to be successful and the town enjoys it, then we would probably say, hey, do you want to do it again? So
Can you
to answer, it's
clarify,
temporary, and it was built to do what.
do you have to buy food from a restaurant to be able to go in there and sit? Because I overheard two people talking one day.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. And I've seen students in there working on their laptops. I've seen people in there drawing. I've seen people in the little barn just in deep conversation while another group was in conversation. So I've talked about making a sign that says the Agora, a community gathering place for dining, drinking, and social therapy. So that's kind of what we're wanting to.
Can you add soft serve ice cream like you talked once about?
Well,
What about the pizza oven,
don't get him
Larry?
started on that. My wife is like pulling the reins on me. I did go down because everyone was out of town but me, and I wanted something to do. I went to a 4-day university on wood-fired pizza, and I kind of got excited about the prospects of a pizza oven. And here's the thing that got me. This company was owned by a man from Sri Lanka who was a big history buff, and he gave a practical sermon on fire. And I had learned what an agora was from Jenna, and he's like, oh, in every old world country, there's an agora with a wood-fired oven. I'm like, hey, I know that. So I've kind of got a little bit of a spark to pursue that, even if it were just for community interest. I think it would be pretty cool if there was a wood-fired oven that could ring a bell and the town would know, oh, Larry's fired up the oven, and you could bring bread down or whatever and cook.
Or you mean people bring it down to cook, you don't
I
cook it?
don't know. I mean, I think about this. That's what it used to be in the old world. Was, it was available for the community to come and share and cook and eat and enjoy each other.
I liked your ice cream idea better.
Well,
Amen.
with pizza, there's always a possibility of ice cream, but
Chris, you had your hand up.
I just, I saw the space, when you guys started working on it. So I like, what's going on there? Because you had trucks coming in, leveling it out and everything. And, thank you guys. I mean, Larry and Kelly, I think it turned out great. And it's fun. Every day I go by, I see people in there using it. I thank you guys. It's such a community wonderful spot, this gathering spot. And I guess my only question was, is how do liquor laws in Minturn work? Can I just grab a couple beers from my house, go down there, sit down there, crack them open and drink? I
You
don't
can
know.
take one.
You can take one? Like, how does that, I guess I was just wondering how that worked.
But Jay explained it to us very well because I think Ally and Doug were very much interested in it. And because of how our liquor laws work in the town and what Governor Polis just signed another extension for 4 years. As long as we don't hold a liquor license in that space, then yeah, you can go get a drink from your home or from a restaurant and
Okay.
you can bring it in. It's interesting. The barn is a kind of a special place too. It's really cozy. And one of my son's friends asked if he could record music there with his family, and they all came down, but they brought coolers, and then they needed to use the bathroom. And I said, well, there's a public restroom right down the alley, but if you went and bought a beer from our local restaurant instead of bringing your own, they'd probably let you use their restroom. So they went over and bought a couple of drinks
Good.
and used the restroom. But so we're trying to, as hosts of the space, to enlighten people, encourage people to go visit all the restaurants. I would really love to see a rack of all the menus of the restaurants and establishments in town, and see how this plays out. And I just ordered a Wi-Fi expansion thing from Xfinity for $120 to make the Wi-Fi better outside. So I think people are using it for a multitude of things. And my favorite thing was to see a 91-year-old Belgian lady hearing Dave Tucker play music, and she just got up and started wiggling, and so did my wife, and so did everyone else. It was, and all at the same time, there's kids out there playing with little toys that Kelly had
And
put in a
Dave's
toy chest.
Dave's playing right now too. A little plug for Dave.
Anyway, any other questions on it?
I just wanted to say that I've discovered it during its construction side. We're just happening to walk by the river and saw the doors open of the building and walk through there, and it's an amazing little structure. And then going in there, it was a great experience, personal experience that I have had, and it wasn't even done yet. It was neat. And then I did see a couple of people walking on the streets. They had shopping bags, so they may have been at your store or another store in Minturn, and she was standing there and looking at it, and she just kept getting closer and closer. So they're absolutely correct. That's what street art's for. That's what, invigorating a whole town with something that is very unique and unexpected. You get people, you catch their attention. It gives them a reason to stop. And that's something that Minturn really needs besides just Saturdays at the market. We want to make sure that people go, whoa, something's going on here. I want to be part of it. The more activity you see outside, the more likelihood that people also want to be part of that group as well. So these public gathering spaces are really important. So I really think it's neat.
Thank you. It was a little bit of a concern having the Airbnb rental, but we took extensive effort to make our website echo what we're doing next door, and just letting people know, if you are not interested in the types of events, and there's a calendar of events that show what's happening, then you might want to book somewhere else. So far, we've had 3 guests come in, and everyone has loved it and thought it was fantastic. We shut it down at 9 o'clock, and it's pretty much crickets not long after that. We've hosted a wedding there, and we're going to host fly fishing women that were there last year, and they're coming back again this year. And we're hosting another wedding a little bit later.
We've had yoga.
There's yoga out there, and there's going to be a vintage clothing swap happening out there. And I think that was one of the things that Jane really was pushing. She wants to work with kids and art projects. So it will be diverse. It's not going to be just a food place, but we felt like it was working for everyone. So
We also had Lynn Feiger with the Art Guild interested in using the space for shows.
they're doing a 50-person event there.
And yard sale they're talking about. So I think we're not really limiting it to one thing. It's a multi-purpose space. And I personally love the connection to the river, like when we open up the barn. My dream, and I've talked to Cindy about it, is to extend the market along the creek. And that's it's like the one calm place in Minturn besides Little Beach to just relax. And for me, Main Street is just tense and people are slamming their brakes on hard. So we can create a little oasis off of Main Street that's just a place to relax. I think it's win-win for the tourists and the people, the locals, the dog walkers that walk along the river there. I think the town should really encourage the river space to be used to attract people to relax. And also, like, imagine having a massage in a little tent on the grass, and you just hear the river. That was one of my dreams. A friend in Idaho is doing something similar like that. And
Go down there and listen to Dave Tucker.
Well,
So-
I also encourage this use in particular as well, because when you have people staying at the house, you don't want them to go, all right, time to go to Vail. And all of a sudden they're taking their money out of town. You want to keep them here. So this is a way to go, why don't we just go next door and just order some food and stay here and hang out and spend money? That's the kind of stuff that we need here as well, because we do have such an outflux of people's dollars leaving town for entertainment or just hanging out or someplace to be and feel that they're not outsiders and experience. They want to have experience. That's what travel is these days. It's
In
all about
Minturn,
that.
people just like to walk around. So if they don't have to get in the car and go to Vail, like you said, we can keep them there. There was talk of doing food trucks there, but then you look at the space and how little space is left after that, and then you're competing with the restaurants that are already established. We thought it would be better to, instead of turning our backs on the restaurants, to invite them into the space. Kind of like the problem of Eagle, where they built a separate Eagle and abandoned the main street. We didn't want to piss them off, and we'd rather encourage them. And
Michelle, oh, I'm sorry, Jen.
I just have one more comment and then I'll shut up. Yeah, the big thing, and this goes back to the NIOP thing that we were just talking about. So what's happening in the trend in Denver is to take old buildings and put the restaurant kiosks inside and have that. This is effectively the same thing. It's just, you just have outdoor, reach out to the restaurants. It's very successful. The next generations are really loving it. All we really need, is kind of a little brewery to pop up. And then we're all set. We've got the same thing, that it's actually a very sustainable and trending land use in areas with little overhead, and they're not fancy, but people love them for what they are. It's just a piece of something that's very grounded. So yeah, you're right in alignment with what's happening in the market, free market.
That brewery and his beer or his pizza oven.
I know.
That could go together. I mean.
combination.
It's gonna be a microbrewery next time.
But I always like to
Nice.
try, I always say, like, people on vacation, when you're on vacation, what do you take photos of? And that's what I like to try to create, is an experience and a memory for people.
Are those picnic tables behind there on the river? Is that the town's, or is that something you've added? There's like 3 of them at the far end behind the antique store,
Yep, the town put them there yesterday.
and anybody can go there also. Okay, I mean, no, it's not specifically for one of the businesses or anything.
I did paint one of the benches, active urban vandalism. I repainted the red bench.
Shocker.
And personally, I would like to thank you very much for closing down at 9 o'clock.
Jeff, you had a question?
Jeff?
Yeah, hi.
Jeff,
Yep.
you awake?
Nope, I'm not awake. Thank you guys for coming. Kelly, is that true? Like, that it was only there for 24 hours and you've already painted it?
The what? Street light?
No, the picnic table.
No.
No.
The little red bench was kind of
It was
faded
graffiti.
away. And graffiti.
Paint was peeling off it, and someone had actually tagged it with graffiti, which I'm not a fan of.
I like it. I think it's awesome. I mean, it's so funny because it reminds me of almost kind of like what Mangoes used to be, the old Mangoes, when it was just a house and the space outside people would hang out at the bonfire outside, and the doors were always open in the front and back, and the dogs would just sort of wander in and out while people were eating. And, when someone says what, Minturn funky, etc., this is a perfect example of what that is.
I did
And-
create the first mangoes, by the way.
I know. I guess a couple of the
The community aspect stays alive when it comes to being responsible citizens when coming into the place, not smoking, not being obnoxious, and pack out what you brought in, that type of thing. So we're having conversations about doing possibly a sign up sheet of a Agora host that you just come in and kind of check on things and make sure the lights are out and everything's locked up as we close out each evening. So it's an experiment.
I hear you.
And I hope it works.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think it's awesome. I think from the music standpoint of it, the questions I had, because I kind of heard through the grapevine that there's sort of like a schedule out there of music to happen in there, and I appreciate that those nights are going, they're not competing with anything else in town as far as like summer concerts or anything like that. But has there been much backlash from the neighbors on the noise levels at night during the week, or any night, during the week that's more troublesome? Is Frank, is it all thumbs up from Frank that there's music going on in there and bumping on a Wednesday night, or is it going to be a problem?
Well, yes, it could be a problem if it were unrained. I think the first weekend when we let Allie go with her plans, I think she was catering to a younger crowd and more DJ driven, which has the loud bass. And Frank hasn't complained about anything at all. But anyone in any part of town, I'm sure, heard the bass that was happening.
Right.
So we put the kibosh on DJ music. So as young kids do, they find a way around it. So I believe there's going to be a silent disco event
Exactly.
that's happening. So you can go down and wiggle to your own rhythms.
What is
Um,
a silent disco?
I was
even?
just going to say, Larry,
And you can dance with each other. You may be listening to totally different music.
And the headsets change colors for each song that there's generally 3 different things being spun. I did this in San Francisco. It was awesome.
And
And it's like blue, yellow, and green or something. And you dance with the people that have the same color. It's awesome.
yeah, silent discos
really
are amazing.
appreciate what Allie has brought to our garden here in Minturn, because she does attract a younger group of people that are looking for things to do, and she's ambitious to try to provide those things. And I think that it's being met with some resistance where it begins to be too loud and or offensive, and it's also being met with alternatives, and she's coming to the table with solutions. I think it's fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of younger people come into Minturn that had no idea that Minturn was even here. So I think that there's a benefit to it. It just takes responsible management. And I think if we could get you down there playing some music, that would be very helpful for the whole thing.
I appreciate that. Unfortunately, sometimes the music that I play is a little loud as well. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really the management of it. I mean, I've been here a long time. I've watched a lot of really cool outdoor spaces evolve and be in their heyday, and then be completely wrecked by a certain demographic and a certain type of person, and I'm not going to throw a label on it where it's someone that listens to this kind of music or listens to that. It's just a disrespectful person who doesn't respect the space. And I think as long as you have a great idea of like having Agora managers or Agora hosts for the evening that are there, there should always, it's like a VRBO or something, you know, there should be somebody who's in charge, someone that knows that they're in charge that night or whatever, when something's going on. And, you know, when there's a problem, who do you talk to? And there's a plan for how to deal with those things. And I know you can't plan for everything, but, you know, knowing that it's an experiment and it's a work in progress is important, as long as you're, you know, checking in with it all the time and someone's got their finger on the pulse as to the demographic or who's hanging out there. And then I think, you know, a curfew is also probably important, so that the community understands, you know, what time it's supposed to shut down there and not carry on for another hour or two, and let people just sort of fade into the shadows, you know, of hang out in the Agora and do whatever till 3 a.m. Like, it's probably not cool, I'm sure, for that either. But I think it's just an amazing addition to the town. I love the energy of it. And I think it's exactly, you know, what the town needs, as long as it's properly managed.
We feel like, as Lynn was pointing out, the nod towards the 9 o'clock closing. For Jane and I, we just feel like anything that's beyond 9 is headed down a different path than what we're looking for the space. So we're looking at a 9 to 9 type of operation during the summer and shutting it down for the winter.
I think that's
It's-
amazing. Yeah, I'm all for it.
Well, and I like the fact that you've gone to smaller musician, you know, like 1 or 2 people. I know Jean would love to play over there, so get a hold of her when she's back from vacation. That makes a difference. It doesn't, you know, we're in this narrow valley with these walls and everything bounces off of them if it's too loud. Like you say, the bass that night was loud. But now that it's down to, like Dave Tucker knows, it's just the perfect size for that kind of event.
And they
space.
don't really have to amplify loud.
No. And people can hear themselves talking at those then too.
The older people like to hear each other talk. The young kids always like to boost it up because they still have the hearing.
Well,
is
I
attractive.
still have the hearing, so I'm the opposite. I'm older, I have the hearing, but I can hear the noise up here. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
But there is, Ally's done a really good job of marketing and, you know, Instagram and just getting people from elsewhere and especially Vail to come to Minturn, which
And the economic point of view, I know Patty has seen improvements and I know that Doug and Ally have seen a lot of improvements too. And I'm sure Jay will recognize as the summer goes through the positive impact to it. So do y'all have any concerns that we can address? And we're here all ears to.
You know what, I've been to certain places and I have seen the list of rules that are just kind of on the wall.
Code
and
of conduct
especially-
kind of thing.
Yeah, especially when there's a humoristic aspect to it.
Yankees do it.
Yeah, and because it is largely a self-management process as a general rule, you're encouraging that. And just to tell people, hey, remind them that because we do have a new influx of population that may not be used to, or they demand being more catered to, and they should be aware that, you know, no one's going to come pick up after you. You need to do it yourself type of thing. I'd recommend that just being, and if it's done artistically as well, kind of fits into the space. I think that's something that just, you know, doesn't move. It's kind of tacked on the wall and becomes
We
part of
discussed
the
this
place.
already and
Yeah, I think,
haven't defined the
The
rules
code of
yet.
yeah, and, you know, like I said, and just take it with a really nice, a humoristic approach would be well received. I think that's the only thing that's really missing. And then just, you know, when the signs up, all welcome, that's going to be a big changer too, because it is defined so much along the sidewalk. It looks like a gateway, so people are a little tentative just to know if it's, oh, am I supposed to be in here? Once they figure it out. And then it's going to be really important to do that kind of information thing when the market's here. I know this space is going to be, because we've seen sunrise. People are lined up at the door to get food and so forth in that coffee shop, and they're kind of clogging up that sidewalk. Well, now they're going to be like, oh, let's just go in here, which is awesome. I just have to make sure that, you know, somebody, maybe a volunteer for the market or something, could be in charge of the space on Saturdays. You know, that'd be a good target person just to keep their eyes peeled and keep it clean and take the garbage out. That's the only thing that I think is going to be really impactful. It's going to be harder to manage.
Michelle, may I make one quick question? And it doesn't necessarily relate to this, but will we have tables and chairs back at the market this year?
I.
Or should I
check
call
with
Cindy?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Not expect.
so that might even be another reason why that will be steadily busy. Because I know we're having food and food trucks, and if the people have no place to really sit and eat, they're gonna be going across the street by you.
Yeah, and I hope on the river too with the new picnic tables.
That's
I think
true,
the town's
that's
really
true.
stepped up to
Right.
provide those opportunities.
And now that I know they're there, I'll be sending people over there if they wanna, where can we go and sit? And, over to the river.
And another space I saw recently in Denver, they had, it was like a little garden shed. And it was basically full of books, and people, when it's open, just unlock the doors, and it was just, you could just grab a book. And I'd love to see just people reading and
You can start a-
discussing
a
things.
Book club?
I just have architectural books, they're boring.
There was
But,
a Hallmark movie, which Scott teases me about this winter. And they showed this town that developed bars and small restaurants, and they called them books, wine, and games. And you went and got your glass of wine, and you either picked up a book or you picked up a board game.
Yeah,
And you
board games would
sat
be
there,
fun.
and it was great.
Kelly's put board games in there.
a couple, they're in the toy box.
As a rock'em sock'em plastic.
Yeah,
Another thing I was
Ping pong table.
it's, one thing when we used to run the Minturn Inn was we had wine and cheese after skiing, and people would just come together and discuss where they skied. And I kind of think we could do that possibly with a trail map of the trails of Minturn, and people, can also be like, hey, after a hike, you come there to cool off, grab a drink and talk about your hike, if you're a tourist and where you went. But I saw that in Minturn Inn, and just everyone loved just to discuss their day and what they did with fellow strangers. It was really kind of a fun dynamic.
Well, I just had a gig at Bearcat Stables, and one of the food vendors did not have a truck, but they showed up, and they were a raclette vendor. So there you go. We could have a raclette night at the Agora and invite them in. They brought everything with them, and I was like, who thought someone would have a mobile raclette organization? But
on a sandwich or a dip, like a fondue,
sky's the
like
limit.
a fondue.
Yep, and we're open to ideas from
Mhm.
everybody,
Okay,
because we want it to be everybody's space.
Tom, are you still out there? Tom,
I'm still here. Yep.
do you have any comments, sir, before I start to wrap this up?
Wrapping it up would be good.
Okay,
Dining,
I know you
drinking,
like that.
silent disco, conversation therapy. Look forward to it. Great idea. Appreciate it.
Okay, so the staff is recommending approval with conditions, and there are 4 conditions. Is that, yes? Oh, please open to public. I feel like we've been sitting here to public comment. I'm going to open the meeting to public comment. Is there anybody else out there?
Yes, I have received a public comment that needs to be read into the record.
Please.
So this was an email sent to the town council, but for comment to this meeting, it says, by way of introduction, I am a new resident of Minturn. I moved to 103 Lions Lane in the Minturn Townhomes in January. I have lived in the valley full-time for 5 years. I am writing in support of the new community space. I believe the space is a much-needed and welcome addition. Please let me know if I can do anything to help the town of Minturn. I'm a retired lawyer and have time available to volunteer. Best regards, Candace L. Jenkins, 103 Lions Lane. Who's your new
Thank you,
manager?
Candace.
And lawyer.
And lawyer. Liability negotiation.
And after public comment closes, staff has a few comments. we
Okay,
submitted.
and Greg, did you raise your hand quickly there? No? Okay, oh, you just raised a thumbs up. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comment and go back to Michelle.
So thank you. Because Geronimo was brought up, we all love Geronimo. He's near and dear to our heart. We lived next to Geronimo all winter in the Eagle River Park, which was really looking the other way. And it's really tough to enforce the code when there's certain aspects of the code that are clearly not being implemented in certain areas. So Larry, if you can help us out with that, if it could just move every 72 hours, that's all we need.
You got it.
I also was under the understanding that this project might have received some Department of Local Affairs grant funding.
I'm not sure because I was not a recipient of it. That would have been Ally and Doug for
Okay, great.
Moonrise. They were the ones that put in all of the.
Perfect. And then I wanted to just provide a quick update to the commission. The town of Minturn has received a Colorado Department of Transportation grant. And really, the grant was this winter, we received it this winter, and it was specifically for outdoor seating to help accommodate restaurants who needed more space due to the COVID restrictions. I have to say that the grant has been strung out, and this has really fit the bill of what the grant we received would have been trying to accomplish, but this accomplishes it in so much more of a Minturn aspect. It's specifically for revitalizing main streets and the downtown areas. So we're extremely excited about this from Cindy's office and an economic development standpoint. We have talked to CDOT. We will still be moving forward with the grant, but not with structures that we had initially anticipated. The structures we had anticipated would be required to be brought down in the wintertime because we don't own any of the land. The town doesn't own any of the land. And that was going to make it really tough to make them as Minturny as we wanted. This fits the bill. So what we are now doing instead is we are hoping, if all goes well, to work with this and include more picnic benches along the riverfront for folks to increase that access to the river. We're also looking as part of this grant to install some directories of the downtown area and of Minturn in general. And so we hope we can talk to Larry and Kelly about potentially a cute directory map somewhere in there to be hung to show folks the businesses we have in town, how to get to Little Beach and the bike park and things like that. And we'll be looking to commission that work from someone here in Minturn. And the other thing that now we have the ability to try to do is we can take the money that was going to be used for the temporary structures in the downtown area, and we're now looking at getting approval for a pavilion out at the bike park. At the seating structure. So this is such an exciting opportunity from the town's perspective, from staff's perspective. I was in there just the other day. It was so great. We're going to start having some office time down there to hang out and get some work done from the office. But we wanted to thank you for all that you've done. It is no surprise that when Kelly got involved, it became bigger than anticipated. But it's really great. I've definitely been one of those people turning my head as I go by. Loved it when the flowers went in. Yeah.
And then back to the sign, I believe Steve Klein studio years ago did a sign, and I worked on a frame and it got taken down years ago.
We don't have that.
And I don't know where all that, but we had that.
Oh, you have it.
No, the town had a sign map, and it got taken down as part of the road construction, I believe.
And I'm not
stored
sure
somewhere.
who took it down or where it is. I don't think it was
But
us.
we had all that, and it got removed, and I don't know the details of what happened to it.
I assumed you took it and ran. Okay. Well, then we can either use that, or if it requires updating, we can look at getting some updating, because we're looking to have coordinating signage throughout the downtown area, plus a directory sign out at the pavilion at the bike park, directing folks to where they can come get food and shop downtown.
Yeah, I could talk to Steve, and I know he has it on his computer, and it would probably need some tweaking and updating because it was a few years ago. And I'm sure he would be happy to do that.
Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay, back to making a motion. It's on page 1 of this, or page 20. And at the bottom are the conditions. Would somebody like to make the motion?
Sure.
I make a motion to approve the design review application for 152 Main Street called the Agora Edition, including staff's recommending conditions.
Is that good enough, Madison? Okay, is second, please.
Second,
Second, please.
second, Jeff.
Motion by Jenna, second by Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With approval, we certainly would like to invite a community outing for the town folks. I know that there's some legality challenges of council getting together or P and Z, but we would love to host an event over there. And I was thinking of speaking with the community fund to see if we couldn't rally restaurants to pitch in and thank the town for, especially the public works folks and all the staff members who put in a lot. So it would be a space. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Next on the agenda, Minturn North PUD Railroad Planned Unit Development Preliminary Plat Review. Scott?
Question.
Oh.
Recuse myself. Do I have to literally physically leave the room, or how does that work?
You certainly can. I've seen it done both ways. I've seen people physically remove themselves. I suggest that's probably the best way to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then come back when it's done.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks for asking that, Ellen.
Yeah.
You don't have Elliot's number?
I'll go watch it on YouTube.
When we're wrapping it up, you can come back in and say goodnight.
Yeah. I think that's easy.
Madam Chair, I'll get going because I know, I think this is the last item we really have on the agenda tonight. So as you may recall, Minturn North Preliminary Development Plan for PUD was initially reviewed by the Planning Commission at a public hearing on April 14th. During that meeting, the Planning Commission voted to continue the review to a date certain, and that date was June 23rd. We had, following that action by the Planning Commission, had confirmed with the applicant that we would like their resubmittal, and that I should back up. That was one of the reasons why the continuance was entertained and acted upon, was just to allow the applicant to fully address a number of outstanding issues that the staff had identified during the review, which had occurred over the winter. So, it was discussed and acted upon at that meeting, and staff followed up with the applicant to say, okay, if we're gonna hear you again on June 23rd, we need about a month to review the updated materials, your response to these outstanding issues, and then be able to finish our staff report. For the April 14th meeting, we issued a staff memo, but it was not a full staff report. So you didn't get the full, here's how the PUD aligns with the community plan. Here's how it addresses or complies with the standards for a PUD, the normal, analysis that would go into that. So the thinking was that we would need some time to be able to do that. In that time since April 14th, and certainly before the May 28th deadline that we had given the applicant, we were in communication with the applicant on a pretty regular basis. They certainly were asking for our guidance on how best to address a number of outstanding issues. As with any of these big projects and with our life these days, there's a lot going on the applicant side. With regard to how busy their consultants are. There's a lot going on our side too. So trying to align schedules and trying to respond to requests by the applicant, it became pretty clear before May 28th that we were not going to get that submittal. I did grant an extension to allow them to continue to work on that. Again, I think in my opinion, there's been a good faith effort on both sides to keep working towards addressing these issues, understanding them from the applicant standpoint, understanding what exactly staff is looking for and how we would like it presented. That has not stopped. So I didn't really bat an eye in granting that extension because for me, it didn't serve any real purpose to not allow them to keep moving toward that goal. I've also included in a staff report before you tonight, the section out of the code that we need to probably focus on. As you recall, on April 14th, staff, according to the code, cannot recommend continuance. Our recommendations have to come in the form of approval, approval with conditions, or denial. We discussed the fact that the Planning Commission has the ability to grant a continuance. And you discussed the file, you discussed the situation that we were in, and without a formal request for a continuance from the applicant, i.e. a written request, you continued the hearing until June 23rd. The code allows for the applicant to request and be granted one continuance. You can grant subsequent continuances after that. So I think we're looking at this particular situation is the applicant in this case has said, we're not going to meet your May 28th deadline. We're all wide-eyed about that. And we're still communicating with them. We're still trying to work through those things. They do think that they can make the July 28th public hearing, in which case I think we've asked them to get us a revised package addressing all of our issues by June 28th, which is next week. In the same breath, I asked them to come before you and also provide a written request for continuance. So this would be their one written continuance request, which according to the code shall be granted. And that's why we're here tonight. So in summary, I believe that we're working towards a point where we're going to get that material. Greg Sparhawk is here tonight. Wendell Porterfield is here tonight representing the applicant team. They can answer questions. They can update you. Greg did provide a letter formally requesting a continuance, explaining what they were doing. With that, I'll turn it over to you. I know Richard is also on the call. And I think he could answer any questions that Planning Commission members have with regard to the code, our requirements, and what we're allowed to do. So.
Greg, would you like to stand up, introduce yourself, and give us your address, please?
Always with the address. Greg Sparhawk, 245 Pine Street, intern. Commissioners, Madam Chair, staff, thank you all for your time and consideration of this. Scott, thank you for kind of describing the situation. It is a big project. The last meeting when we had requested the 60-day the 60-day extension, kind of came away from that meeting thinking that, okay, 60 days, we can get a lot done in 60 days. And then it was, okay, wait a second. No, actually it's not 60 days. It's quite a bit less. So we did work really hard to try to meet the deadline. And as Scott mentioned, discussions back and forth, staff felt that there were still some holes that needed to be addressed. So we wanted to request the continuance so we could continue to work with staff. We are planning on having everything back in on Monday, the 28th. And then we have also scheduled a kind of a subsequent meeting on the 30th to all get together and go through everything as well, to just kind of go through there are a number of items, most of which I think are going to be real quick, just kind of communication back and forth. It's just, with the size of the project, it's, and as Scott had mentioned, people schedules, consultant schedules. Yeah, it's been just kind of bogged down a little bit, but we are still pushing forward. We're still excited, hoping to get the continuance, come back and hopefully get to a point where we can get a recommendation for approval with conditions in July. And I'm happy to answer any questions for whoever.
How do you think so far? Do you find that there's anything that's really you're sitting on the fence about, or do you feel that you'll be able to accomplish everything you need to? Is there anything that's just kind of tentative
With
at this point?
with the timing?
Yeah, or just in general, like I know the railroad drags their feet and things like that. Do you think that they're going to hold you up at all or anything with that kind of stuff? That's gonna.
The town and the railroad have been working through the legal access issue. And that has been, attorneys and attorneys and attorneys and attorneys, no offense, Wendell. But there's been a lot of back and forth and redlining and comments and discussion. So Michelle's not here anymore, but she, in a discussion last week, we got the impression from her that that's very close to being resolved, and we get the same impression from the railroad. So hopeful that that's going to get worked out here very quickly.
Yeah, there's nothing like waiting.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on.
That
Okay.
seems to be the biggest hurdle to being able to get a vested, any type of vested rights, is having that resolved.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, cool. Good.
Chris?
Thank you, Greg. I know you guys over here at the town are busy. I know you're busy. So just to hear from Scott about the good faith of working together, it makes me feel good to hear that. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for working hard.
Tom, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. Greg, haven't met. Hopefully we do. Obviously, I was the strongest proponent of you guys showing up today. And I'll give you the basic background and premise of why I'm doing that. It's going with the fact is, I won't retread history entirely, but obviously staff rec to not have that April 14th meeting. You guys felt pretty strongly about your package. So you pressed, you had the open house, you had representatives saying you're breaking ground this summer. And then in the end, we have this continuance, and now we're looking at a second continuance. So I think you can understand there would be some concerns about the credibility of the package at different levels. Thus, the reason I wanted kind of a face-to-face to have that conversation. You already referenced Union Pacific legal access piece. So obviously working through that. I know the town has you reconsider Minturn Road, west side parking. I'm curious in your package, since it's going to be hitting the street here in 5 days, if you, based on this possible access, have revisited that, considering we're talking about a 2-lane with available parking with wintertime. Is that in there or not?
I'm sorry, Tom, in reference to the Minturn Road.
So the Minturn Road, are you still looking at the west side expansion of a parking lane in conjunction with that build?
Yeah, gotcha. Sorry, I didn't catch it the first time. So we had initially come in and we had parking stacked along the entire length of Minturn Road. There were concerns from Eagle County for the trail construction with it being so close. We've got a 50-foot right of way there. We had a trail stacked up kind of close to the parallel parking right off the road. That what was further causing issue is the grading that we're having to raise Minturn Road was causing grading off onto the Union Pacific Rail Yard, onto their property. So there's a big amount of pushback from the railroad for the amount of grading that we were kind of overgrading. And coming back, and then there was also pushback on the width of the bike trail that we were proposing. So to try to kind of meet in the middle, we've reduced the amount of parking. So it's not completely lined with parking, but there are still parking areas to allow for kind of overflow, guest parking, market parking, that type of thing. The trail meanders a little bit along there, but it does so in such a way that these areas where we were grading over onto the property quite a bit pulls it back to reduce grading there. The trail is going to be a summer use only. So that in conjunction with these kind of wider areas is also helping to create much more snow storage. That was also a concern. So I don't know if that answers what you were looking for or not.
It segues into also, I know originally you weren't a big fan of providing a full schematic of a potential breakdown of available street parking spots based on cutouts, because obviously you were leaving the design to the individual homeowner or buyer. Did, since that time, you guys at least come up with a generic schematic that gives at least a reasonable plus or minus on available parking spots, particularly on Taylor Street, under a two-way traffic scenario?
We did. So we ended up determining where the driveways were going to go per kind of what we felt the direction we were getting pushed, or not getting pushed, but it was recommended kind of by the engineering and by staff, is to identify those so we could give a solid number with parking. So yes, the parking numbers are coming in with that setup.
Okay, and in the last part of the grant, parking and road, an extremely contentious issue was the proposal of turning Taylor into a one-way, which just from my end, I think is kind of dead on arrival. But based on the town engineer comment, looking at your tract M1 squaring off that south tip in order to provide a 90-degree intersection between Minturn Road and Taylor, have you looked at that as well?
We did. I would have the engineer talk about that when we come in. There were grading and slope issues with the transition there that made that a bigger problem. I agree with you personally with the two-way street. I think it's a better way to do it than the one-way. I think we could handle the issue with that intersection with signage. But one of the recommended one of the two recommended solutions was one way. We initially proposed just to do that with a dashed line for that very fact. I felt like we were going to come in and say, here's where one way would be, and it would get shot down right away and not go down the path of going through the engineering and then re-engineering it back. But given that we're trying to come in with 90% of construction document, we've had to take some of these things through to their completion. So we do currently still have the proposed one way, and then it's we're happy to do whatever. If it's two way, if it's one way, we'll do it. We just kind of need to have the direction, I guess, ultimately from the planning commission and town council.
So on CDOT matters, even though it's not technically known as Minturn Road Bridge, left turn lane, South 24, any further process there to mitigate traffic coming into town and turning on Main Street Bridge?
Yeah, we are. So with CDOT and the Dowd kind of North Bridge there, we are putting in a deceleration lane and a turn lane there. We've got the access permit. We're working through kind of the design process and documents with CDOT right now. We've had the meeting where they essentially tell us, what the size of the lanes need to be and all that stuff. So we're working through that part. And then down at Highway 24 and Main Street, we've met out there with CDOT. We've got the access permit there. And in that location, because of the amount of spatial limitations that are in place, there's going to be some kind of striping and signage that'll take place there to help mitigate that intersection.
Okay, density, I know that's near and dear to your heart. Based on just lots phase 1, phase 2, you're talking roughly 150% increase on what currently exists in the Game Creek area. And potentially based on your ADU math, unless that changed, somewhere about 300% increase on current residents and properties. So that said, I know part of this is the town, part of this is you guys, and it's certainly Union Pacific. But in this continual legalese discussion, has there been any talk about the fact that essentially you're talking about an area when we get to that point, if we get to that point, that is as dense as going from Minturn Anglers to Kirby and everything to the east and west, Kirby Barbecue. So that said, I think we can agree that Railroad Avenue is essentially an alley with no safe pedestrian access between the turnoff Main Street until it crosses the railroad and becomes Minturn Road. So if we're talking that much density up there, in those discussions with UP in regards to access, has that S-curve been re-engaged Or is that a complete red line for them? Because obviously it's a problem.
We've brought it up a handful of times, knowing the importance of it. And it's each time it gets shot down to a hard no. The crossing at that location, given its proximity to the potential or the existing switches that are in place, that crossing, what we've been told, that crossing cannot move.
And Tom, I can speak to that too. I've had direct conversations with Greg Larson at the railroad, at least a couple different times, with regard to how Railroad Avenue and that S-curve relates to this project and how it relates to other things going on in town, the YMCA building or the International Trade Building. And it, as Greg said, it's a hard no. I would like to remind the Planning Commission that we're here to talk about a continuance request tonight, and I don't want to get too far into the guts of the proposal. We're going to have, that hearing. Greg's going to produce the revised submittal, and we can ask more substantive questions at that time.
Yep, tracking all that. Just wanted, as I said earlier, just kind of a status of the package to realize what we're looking at in 30 days. So I'll leave it at this last question, since it was item 65, specifically in your HOA. Curious if that's re-engaged. Maybe Richard can answer it. Provision of the buyers waiving any possible claim against the developer, as to whether that's even in accordance with Kiowa at all, or if you just struck it from your HOA package altogether, or if you're still looking at that.
On the avenue. Okay.
Wendell,
Scott,
do
we need
you
to get
mind
in?
getting up to the mic?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Or, yeah, so
Tom, from a legal perspective and the town's perspective, it's not an issue that we've really been engaging on, and from the town attorney's perspective, I think we're fine not addressing that issue at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thanks for your time.
Jeff, do you have any comments quickly?
I do not.
Thank you, Jeff. I do not. So do we need to make a motion to accept? How do we do this?
yeah, I believe this is an ongoing hearing, right?
Right.
Public comment, I don't know. if we
Public
need to
comment,
take-
do we need that? Okay.
I would, just to be safe.
Okay, will we open to public comment? Anybody out there? Do we have anybody on the computer?
We do have people that are in the meeting. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. It's a button at the bottom of your screen. I'll allow you to talk. We do have one raised hand, Madam Chair.
Okay, can we plug them in?
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hello, this is Anthony Martinez, 232 Tater Street. I've been kind of following all this this planning review. It all looks pretty good to me. I think they're doing a pretty good job trying to redevelop this area. It's pretty washed out. It's pretty beat up. Roads are kind of bad. I know a lot of people down the block are kind of against it, but I like the way it looks in the first planning we saw of it. I would like you to consider the wildlife that's behind the house. I think I said that in the first meeting I met you guys with, and I was wondering if you guys considered putting this a one-way Tater Street and maybe putting a stop sign down on Minturn Road to mediate that intersection right there. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Greg, can you answer that?
Regarding the signage.
The stop sign he talked about?
Yeah, Anthony, thank you for speaking. Yeah, I mean, I agree. If we had went along with the recommendation of the one way, if when we come to when we come to this hearing, if the general consensus is we don't want one way, we want two way, I think you're right. It's some signage, stop signs at that intersection to stop people, and so nobody's just blowing through there. Will probably solve quite a few issues. Yeah, thank you.
Is that it?
I do have a public comment that I need to read into the record since we've opened it. This is from Anastasia Geronimus. To the Planning and Zoning Commission, we would like to express a few considerations regarding the development near Game Creek. We live on Taylor Street and therefore have a close relationship with this project. Number one, snow storage. How will this be addressed per lot? Packing homes on tight lots will make it difficult to remove snow on the small parcel unless it is abundantly clear as to how much space is required on each lot for snow cleared from entryways, decks, and driveway. It is not sustainable, eco-friendly, or logical to plan such tight lot spacing that will require snow to be trucked away. It will be an unnecessary and burdensome cost for the town that can be avoided. Number two, parking. 184 units with three bedrooms per unit equals 552 vehicles. Add 40 plus vehicles needed for the busiest days to access Game Creek Trailhead. We live near the trailhead and have counted 40 plus vehicles midweek, even more on weekends, for which the new residents of this parcel will be more likely to have guests parking on their properties or on the roads as well. For reference, the entire top of Lions Head parking structure holds approximately 400 vehicles. Although Lions Head is likely not as big as the parcel, it is quite large and certainly paints the picture as to how much space cars alone can take up. Now add 100 plus vehicles and houses. We feel it is absolutely necessary that each dwelling is required to have at least one parking spot per bedroom and 2 parking spots for any walk-off and or 1 bedroom rental units, as renters always have guests or couples each with 1 cart could rent 1 room. Please remember the town will take on the costs of the daily working needs of the development, snow removal, managing parking violations, etc., well beyond the developer's short-lived role in this project. Number 3, parking at Game Creek. 14 spaces is not sufficient for summer traffic. We live near the trailhead and can promise you that it is not sufficient for even midweek summer traffic and daily Minturn mile shuttle parking in the winter. Again, we have consistently counted over 40 vehicles parked midweek. Number 4, density. Have you considered duplex lots to make best use of the setback space and offer more space for parking and snow storage on the lots? Number 5, please consider an alley with all driveway access to units within the parcel rather than the Minturn mile ski path. The ski path is a nice idea, but parking is a bigger problem and strain for residents. It will allow for better traffic flow and offload Taylor Street, which is already overloaded with dense street parking. Thank you for your time and consideration. Anna and Duncan Robinson, 531 Taylor Street.
Madison, you did that very well. Okay. Anybody else have anything else quickly to say?
Yep, just that I don't engage in the conversations, but I overhear things when I'm at Rocky Mountain Taco. People are talking about the project and everyone's still very excited about it. So I'm glad that you've made some progress. That's really awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's not, I mean, obviously not as much as we would have liked.
It never is.
We send out, so people can register on the website, and then we send out an email about once every 3 weeks or so, just kind of with updates with where we are and what's going on. As you know, we started taking deposits for kind of on the list, and as things have dragged on, we obviously thought that there was going to be a big exodus, and there hasn't. And we've had some good communications with people about it too. It's actually, we've heard from a couple of people where they're like, it's actually kind of good with lumber prices the way they are and things are. It's the people who thought that they were going to get started this summer, we're hearing there now, like next spring's probably a better bet. But with big drops, it's a good sign of things to come.
So people can go to the website if they want to learn more to keep on the know.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. That's all I have.
The news said yesterday prices are starting to drop on lumber.
We've heard that was coming.
It was on TV yesterday.
30 to 40%.
Yep. It was on the news yesterday morning. I have one quick question, if I might. I have people who sometimes will come in and ask about the project, and I'll say, it hasn't, you can come to public meeting. I mean, sometimes it's people from out of town. And what they want to know is there's still the availability to put a deposit down on a lot. And I said, I really don't know.
No,
Okay.
no, we actually closed it when the amount, the number got to a point where we felt like with attrition after, with time and when all the details come out, that where we'd end up with a number that was right around what would fulfill phase one. So we haven't taken anymore. People could still, their best way to stay informed again would be on that website. And as we know things, we're gonna put information out there for people.
Okay. Thank you. Now, we need a motion
Yes, ma'am.
to accept the request for continuance,
A motion to continue.
a motion to
to-
continue.
To July 28th.
Okay.
All right, I make a motion to continue the Minturn North PUD to date certain of July 28th, 2021.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Motion by Jana, second by Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jeff? Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank
Thank you,
you,
Greg.
staff. Appreciate
Thanks, Wendell. Yep.
I think that's, oh, there's no windows open. I feel like my eyes are burning from that smoke.
Allergies kick back in again.
You want me to close the window?
No, that's okay. I'll make it through. They are starting to burn, but that's okay. It gets worse at night, it seems.
Yeah, I was coughing all last night.
So now we have project updates, chapter 16.
Should probably take that off because I don't have any other chapter 16 code amendments coming your way anytime soon. I may take a stab at some new language for the 100 block and the height stuff. I don't think we ever resolved that.
We never did.
And
And we need to look at that one on parking on businesses
yeah,
or Main Street
Yep.
allotments.
correct.
Planning Director report and minor DRB approvals by Director Belden Place preliminary plan application status.
That preliminary plan has been approved by town council. So that means that Belden Place is now moving forward to final plan, final plat, and subdivision improvement agreements. So the final stage in the PUD approval process. It's not necessarily the time to be going backwards and talking about design and mass and number of units and all that stuff. That was what preliminary plan was for. This next step is largely technical, legal, and financial related. So looking at the final plat, the subdivision plat document that's going to create the lots on which units can be built, create easements, create all the things that we kind of looked at in a physical sense. And then working with the developer on the subdivision improvement agreement. So what's getting built, when, how is it being collateralized? In this development, there's not a lot of offsite improvements that need to be collateralized. There's not a lot of, it's pretty straightforward subdivision improvement agreement. Most of it is being paid for by the developer within its own site. So that's what's coming next for that. I believe we expect that application soon. So we'll be working through the rest of the summer on the final plat review, subdivision improvement agreement, and negotiations, or just finalizing those details. And that's the status.
Any idea when that could come to, does that come back to us?
It actually does. It's very unusual that a final plat would come back before a planning commission, but our code requires 2 stops, planning commission and town council. So I don't know. We haven't received the application yet. It'll go through a similar process of internal review. I'll have to check the code and see what the referral, if we have a referral process for that. It should be mostly internal review. Because we, should be mostly technical issues. We had a long list of conditions, things that need to be cleaned up on the plat, in the PUD document, in the HOA covenants, all those things would then be reviewed, and we will at staff level make sure they've corrected those. So.
Any
update on the 14-day endeavor about the deed versus RO on those 4 properties?
No, I don't, Tom. Quite frankly, I didn't think the 14 days was very realistic to accomplish anything.
Try to help you.
Yeah, I know. I think that's just going to be an ongoing discussion as we move toward final plat and the SIA. I think the will is there. We just need to work through the details, and so.
Okay,
Fence approval?
So I have approved a couple of things over the past couple of weeks. So, this is probably kind of out of order. Let's try and do it in order. 841, we don't require a ton of stuff on a fence application, so that's why this is so rough. But 841 Main, wanted a 4-foot tall dog-eared cedar plank fence around, just to kind of block off a little bit of the highway noise, just because their house is weird with their front door not facing the highway, but instead the side. So that was approved at a staff level.
is that lot inside around the corner?
That is in, I guess, inside what? It's not.
Well,
on-
I guess what I'm saying is it's not a corner lot.
No.
Okay, so there's no vision thing.
Right. And then 443 Pine Street. They actually had an existing fence, but were told when they bought the house a couple years ago that they had seven years, I think, to get their fence off of town property, because of Meadow Lane being behind there. And so they wanted to get that out of the way, so they were just kind of moving it forward onto their property. And then Belden Place applied for a temporary sign permit to allow them to start, I guess, advertising for their project. And so that is 6 feet tall by 4 feet. It is a single faced sign. There is no back to it, which was approved also at staff level.
Was there a permit for a fence for, I was hoping that 400 block, the cute little K2 house, they put up a steel fence in their front. I thought we'd be looking at that. Have they come in? No.
If you can get me an actual address, I can look.
All the cars have Texas plates?
That's not helpful. There are a lot of places in town that have Texas plates.
There's 2 little houses, 2 little gray houses. Anyway, I've seen that they've completed it to steal privacy on the front. I just wondered if they had come in.
I don't
400
believe I've
block where?
approved anything with steel.
Yeah, right on Main Street. It's right up from Tim Campbell's place, 2 doors down.
Okay, I'll drive by there
It looks
tomorrow.
great. I just wondered if that was something that was in or something like that.
There could be somebody who didn't know they had to come by for a permit.
Sorry, guys.
It happened a lot last year. In fact, we ended up putting a blurb in the newsletter saying, "Hey, you need to come in for a permit." So, but that is
It's a good
certainly something that I'll look into.
Yeah, it's a great example. I can't imagine why they wouldn't be approved.
Right. So that's my update.
I understand there's a special council meeting on June 30th regarding the water agreement between.
There's a special council meeting regarding the Battle Mountain funding agreement on June 30th.
But that's open to the public to come in if they'd like. Okay. Just so we mention that, since it's the 5th Wednesday of the month, so.
Right, which is why we could accommodate it on a
Right.
Wednesday,
Right.
because there's not typically a meeting on that day.
Just at the last town council meeting, they also had the Board of County Commissioners come and speak. And they were talking about the paving on, the frontage road. Hopefully that'll, I forgot to mention to Greg, you should probably listen to that or read the minutes from that hearing. Just because they're talking about the county's responsibility and if they're gonna pave it or not, and if they can share or something. They never really answered it, as good little politicians didn't, but I think it's a good conversation to continue because it is a very valuable road. And it was brought up from the town council about safety predominantly. So if we have a rock fall that cuts off, the main access in, that's the road that's gonna get used. And I think there is a good, whether it's, the individual or the town have that conversation, keep continuing on that one. So passing that on. You guys are there.
Future meeting. Oh,
Sorry, Elliot had his hand raised because he's joined. the
hi,
meeting.
Elliot. Are you back here?
He's somewhere.
He's watching YouTube, I think.
We can't hear you, Elliot. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, a little rusty with this. Yeah, I just want to say I'm here. I'm back.
You said you'd come back and say goodnight.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, come back.
understand another PUD application came in this past week. Is that true?
Yes, there is another PUD working its way through the process.
Are you able to disclose as to where that is, or is it got to wait for the process?
It's still kind of early in the process. I would like to continue working on reviewing that before I bring anything forward to the planning commission.
It's in completeness review right now, Tom. So we're kind of running our clock on the completeness review. We've met with the applicant, which was very helpful. And so once we deem the application complete, then it'll officially start through the process.
Okay, sounds good. Busy year.
Formally submitted though.
It has been formally submitted.
Is
Yeah.
there a name on it?
The Midtown,
Oh, the Midtown, okay.
intern Midtown.
Midtown Village.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Therefore, since it's been formally applied for, there should be no discussion on it.
Correct.
amongst people, Correct.
I just wanted the name.
Okay.
It's a live application, so don't talk to people in the post office about it.
I didn't hear the name. What did you say it was?
Midtown Village.
Got it. And that would be where? Kidding.
Okay, future meetings, July 14th and July 28th. Does anybody have any issues? Chris,
July 14th,
will you be calling in or you will not be available?
I probably won't be available.
Nor will I. I'll be on vacation that week.
Madison,
pray
get
for a
ready.
light meeting.
I might not
I
be
may-
there myself. The 28th, I'll be in the East Coast.
Who's saying that? Is Elliot saying that?
So Elliot, will you won't be able to attend at all, or you'll just be calling in virtually on the 20th?
I'll have to get back to you on that. What? Let me. Let me get back to you on that. Does it have to be right now? Do you have to know right now?
No, not at all. Just please keep me posted.
Sure.
The 14th might be an issue for me because I'll be in the air flying across the great big Atlantic Ocean, but I should be landing on the East Coast about 4 o'clock Mountain Time. So hopefully I'm dialing in for the last damn time for a while.
Okay.
Obviously won't be able to let you know till the last minute, but
Everyone possibly.
that should be it.
Use this with 4.
We have
So
4.
we're okay.
My vacation's on the 18th through the 26th, so I can't miss any meeting. I'll be there.
I scheduled mine on purpose to meet. Just kidding.
But when I come
To what?
back, I probably, hopefully will be extremely relaxed.
Nice.
for the 28th. Probably.
Okay, let's close the evening off tonight. I've heard about enough about other people's vacations.
I'm just going to Lions. It's not like I'm going the happiest place on earth. Yeah, I'm going to band camp.
May I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting, please?
I move that we adjourn the meeting for June 23rd, 2021.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tom. Motion by Jenna, second by Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, gentlemen.
Good night.
Night. Be safe.